Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another round of my Patriot Report Live. I am Ratwan Hill, the bridge between connecting the next generation to federal contracting. Hope everybody's having a happy and blessed Friday. It's been a lot of things going on, and from the Wednesday live, I want to bring the energy more positive energy and bring positive light to some things that are going on that are not being widely spread or in the news, and that's regarding our community, which is the veteran population. So essentially, on January 20th, uh, there was a bill passed. A bill signed into law, HR 224. And essentially, the problem was that before, let me give the backstory. Disabled veterans, they were often eligible for VA housing support, but they were disqualified because the income was calculated. They counted the disability compensation as part of that income, which most of the time it disqualified veterans. So for like HUD-VASH, for instance, if you were a 100% disabled veteran, you weren't going to get HUD-VASH because you're going to be considered over the income. Now, what changes? They expanded the VA authority to evaluate disability and income more flexibly. So now it allows the VA to better account for disability-related financial constraints, reduce rigid disqualifications tied to technical income households. So essentially, this intent is to provide housing stability and not gatekeep. And I think this mattered because I think this may be a signal saying, Congress acknowledged that if disabled veterans don't have stable housing, every other program essentially breaks down: training, employment, self-employment. So now they're treating this as an infrastructure, like it's a foundation, which in point of fact, it is the foundation. Because if a veteran is not stable, then that leads to different things, because whether that's drug abuse, alcohol abuse, homelessness, which also and all that ties into and could contribute to the 22 veterans that are losing their life uh, day a day. So having that infrastructure is definitely very important. Another law that was passed, or another law that was passed was HR 1823, or the RISE Act. So the problem before was that the VA experienced budget shortfalls in recent years. So what that caused was delays, program freezes, reduced capacity, but they didn't really give an explanation for why the shortfalls happened, how they affected services, and what was being done to fix them. So essentially, it was a lack of transparency, and it was a lack of accountability on the VA side. So HR 23 was put in place to essentially change that. So now it requires the VA to report directly to Congress on funding gaps, the cause of the shortfalls, impacts on veterans, and essentially it creates pressure on the VA employees and the VA leadership, because now they have to answer to these questions. So, this law essentially is about stopping the VA from quietly not from it's stopping the VA from not meeting their goals and being held more accountable. So the problem before the fast, and also it was a VRE reform in there as well. Now the VRE plans, they were often built once, they weren't updated. They were slow to adapt when a veteran disabilities worsen. So essentially, if a veteran has a disability and say that it was worsened or they got a increase in their rating, or say it was a change in the job environment, if their individualized written plan, which is the a plan that essentially lists the goals and the outcome that you're getting from being enrolled in the VNRE, essentially that was like a finalized plan. So it was, you had to stick to that plan through the beginning to the end. So now this provides more flexibility, and now the VA must redevelop that VNRE individualized written rehabilitation plan when the health condition changes, disability status change, or the plan no longer leads to employment outcome. So what I'm getting from this, right, just from all of the acts and laws that passed, that somebody's speaking up. They're maybe slowly starting to hear us say we need better things in place for veterans. We need a better infrastructure for veterans. We need programs like VNRE. We need self-employment track. We need more flexibility in the individualized written plan, because it doesn't take into account if things change, how the veteran may need to pivot. And on that note, it's another thing that was passed or not passed, but was introduced by Congressman Van Orden, was essentially the on-the-job training and apprenticeship expansion, and plus a housing allowance increase. So within the VA and our benefits, there are different pathways you can take, right? You have the traditional educational pathway. You have on-the-job training. You have apprenticeship. On the VNRE side, you have on-the-job training. So let me go back first. The GI Bill benefits, meaning the post 9/11 GI Bill, you have an on-the-job training and apprenticeship component alongside the traditional educational benefit that you enjoy. On the VRNE side, you also have a on-the-job training, apprenticeship, self-employment track, non-paid work experience. And all of these are pathways to essentially providing you training or education to help you become more feasible, more valuable in whatever industry you're going in. So the problem with the on-the-job training, or I won't say the situation with the on-the-job training and apprenticeship is that housing allowance was only at 80%. So while veterans are going through this experience, a lot of them faced, they struggled with housing and covering rent, living expenses, because they're in the training, but they're not getting the full housing, the full stipend, or the full monthly housing allowance that we get usually when you just go through your educational program, or if you're going through the VNRE educational pathway or self-employment pathway or whatever pathway where you can get your full monthly housing allowance. Many veterans, they essentially, they drop out because they can't keep up with the training and their living, with their living expenses. So, they can't sacrifice their family and life because they're going through a program. So what this bill that Congressman Van Orden introduced, HR 982, it was essentially to expand the access to on-the-job training and registered apprenticeships by increasing the monthly housing from 80% to 90%. Now, ideally, we would want the full stipend, but I mean, progressive steps. And this also is a direct answer to the fact that they're starting to realize that traditional educational pathways may not be as valuable as it was in the past. So if you look at the environment and the climate we're in now, right, you got job stability, job employment stability is on the decline. You look in the federal contracting environment, it's a lot of flux and, a reduction in small businesses. So they understand that what was normalized in the past in regards to employment, they need different pathways. You need something that fast track veterans. Like, how can, they have a bunch of different boot camps and stuff that you could take to, become viable in industries like coding, AI, construction, HVAC, trades. You know what I mean? So they have different programs that allow you to fast track. But what I'm getting from this, or what I've read from all of these actions that's taking place with bills and getting introduced and passed, is that they understand that the veteran population is being underserved, and that they can and should be doing more. So essentially, it seems like they're looking to open the pathway, open the door, open the gateway to make access easier. Now, it's still, another pathway that I like to focus on, something that I had the privilege of being able to go down and figure out and understand at a granular level, and that's the VRE self-employment track, which is something that I preached about, or have introduced, and that's a track that's very, very heavily underutilized, but arguably it could be the most beneficial to veterans. And that's primarily because we know that capital, I said this before, or we said this before, meaning me and Mr. Cotton, that capital is the number one problem when it comes to business owners in general, small business owners, and starting up their small business. VNRE self-employment track answers most of those, answer 99% of those questions. And I say that because, or I hesitated because I think about in the federal contracting space, right? Funding is not all you need as a veteran small business or a small business. It'll help, but to be viable and contract viable and contract ready, you're gonna need a little bit more. Meaning you're gonna need past performance. You're gonna need some type of competencies and capabilities which you can overcome by becoming what we always talk about, a bigger small business. But the point of fact is that the VNRE has a self-employment track that provides 49,999 that a VRE officer can approve, and anything above that, it has to go higher up to the VNRE director. But essentially, that's something that can be done. If you just know how to do it, that it can be done, because if it's in the SOPs and in the regulations, that means that it's there for a reason. We just have the know-how of how to unlock it. And because we've, individuals like myself went down this pathway, we understand that we understand that we have the ability to be able to reach above to those places that we need to in order to get those approvals. But this VNRE self-employment track is something that I would consider any disabled veteran with at least a 10% service-connected disability to check out. If you want to be an entrepreneur, I would tell you definitely check that program out. Now, it's not just a like a GI Bill, the GI Bill benefit where you find the school. When you find the school, then you automatically get approved, and then as long as it's in the system, you're good. Then you get paid, right? You have to be you have to get in, you have an entitlement to it, but you have to get approved for that entitlement. And what they are looking at, right? And I see a lot of people in the comments on YouTube, TikTok, or all the social media platforms speaking on their experience with VRNE. And I know it's the problem. It's a systemic problem, and I know that everybody everybody's is experiencing the same thing. The counselors, the VNRE counselors, only know what they know, right? If they only thing they were taught was the educational track, get them down the educational track, then that's what they're going to push for, because that's what they understand at a granular level. It's easy to have objectives when you got a set track. Like, okay, you go to school, you're gonna graduate school, now you gotta find a job, 2 weeks out, 3 months out, and we'll continue till you find your job. It's something easily. With self-employment, it's a little bit more challenging, because if they're coming from an employer world, they may or may not necessarily understand the business world, the entrepreneurial world. So, and it's also like, okay, we got to decide when you're going to get when you're going to start generating revenue, right? So that's going to always be a question mark. You never know when you're going to generate revenue. You can have an estimation, right? But that leaves a lot of uncertainty, and it also leads to the counselors being able to be subjective about it, because they can't clearly identify a goal and pathway. And that's why Mr. Cotton has a GovCon curriculum, that is based off of a system, right? This is based off of a proven system that allows you to get approved. That allows you to be contract viable, and allows you to be contract ready in the federal contracting space, right? And federal contracting is a feasible business, right? That's also another component of the VNRE self-employment track, is that it has to be a feasible business. That's one side of the coin. And then the other side of the coin is, of course, in the beginning of the approval process, why is your disabilities stopping you from getting employment? So essentially, you have to be able to justify your disabilities being so bad that self-employment is the only pathway for you, right? So if you experience anxiety, you got PTSD, maybe you can't be in front of people you're not comfortable being in a public setting and space with a bunch of other people because it triggers your anxiety, or it puts you on edge and you're not effective with your job. If you work in labor, hard labor, construction, and you have arthritis in your back, you can't do the construction because it worsens your disability. So essentially, you just need to be able to justify why your disabilities are stopping you from maintaining suitable employment. And then the other part of the self-employment track is the feasibility of the business. And that's where I was explaining that because of federal contracting, in the federal contracting landscape, right? If you're a service disabled veteran, meaning you have a service connected disability, that you get preference in the VA. You have a preference in the Department of Defense. There is a 5% goal for service disabled veteran owned small businesses. You can look in the Small Business Act. 23% of that of the federal government budget goes to small businesses. 5% of that goes to service disabled veterans. You have a competitive advantage because you have the Public Law 109461, Vets First Contracting Program. You have the preference in the DOD program. So therefore, you have a competitive advantage in those spaces, which makes this industry more viable. And not only that, to include that, it's a reduction in small businesses. There's disruption in the small business, in the federal contracting landscape, more specifically in the small businesses with all the auditing that's going on right now. And even the Department of Defense Secretary, Mr. Hegseth, latest announcement in regards to the DOD looking at all small business contracts over 20 million and doing a line by line item review. But essentially, all of this has shifted a huge opportunity into the service disabled veteran owned small business community. So therefore, you being a veteran, you being a service disabled veteran is in the federal contracting landscape is a very feasible and very viable pathway into federal contracting, right? So that's a good way to get into a business. It's a feasible idea. You know, you have structure, you have a system, you have laws, you have regulations, you have everything on your side to justify you going down that self-employment track, right? And those are the two key components. So not saying you couldn't get approved for other businesses. I'm just telling you what I've done, what I know is the most viable, most feasible pathway. And what we've been, saying time in and time out again we've been saying for weeks, months now on My Patriot Report Live, there's a $1.3 trillion market opportunity, right? And only thing you need to do as a service disabled veteran is put yourself in position to securing those federal contract opportunities. And you do that by creating a bigger small business. And if you want to know exactly what that means, how you put together, how you become a bigger small business as a service disabled veteran, that's more the reason why you need to join the elite SDVOSB network, because that is the oldest veteran VSO specifically designed or built for contracting. So if you're going to go anywhere to learn contracting, you need to go to where they specifically designed it for veterans to learn contracting, right? That's where you would go. And then you get to be in a community full of individuals like Mr. Cotton, who is responsible for helping move the service disabled veteran-owned small business contracting needle from 750 million to way past 19 billion. We're talking about he co-authored the legislation that created the All Small Business Mentor Protege, which gave every small business access to that Mentor Protege program, where it was historically only for 8A. So to be around people like that, and even more people, people who have been in the industry on both sides with well over 20. So what you getting is an organization that has way more than over 100 years of experience in this federal contracting domain. So if you need to be anywhere learning how to do this, you need to learn how from a proven system, from a proven system, from a community and environment of veterans that are looking to empower and help build generational wealth. And VR&E is a pathway to help you be able to subsidize your income while you're learning, because they have the your monthly housing allowance or stipend. And I'm gonna give you guys a little pointer or tip made that you may or may not know. No, the Chapter 31 or the VRE benefit, benefit, that stipend, that monthly housing allowance has a different rate from the post 9/11 GI Bill rate. But this is what a lot of veterans don't know or may or may not been told, that you can elect to choose your post 9/11 GI Bill rate for your VNRE benefit. So simply put, you can use your how much you would get paid for your GI Bill. You can select that rate instead of the VNRE rate, which is lower. And so I would tell you guys to take full advantage of that, and look at the MVAC, which is the standing operating procedures for the VNRE program. Read that front and back like I did, and you'll start to understand, or you'll start to see a lot of the benefits and things that you may have been underutilizing or overlooking, and get in where you fit in. And that's all I have for you guys today. Enjoy your weekend. I am Retwan Hill. Until next time, y'all, I am out.